So hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to the Working Woodlands, the Ecology of Bats presentation. Today we're going to have Adam Kozlowski, who's a Northeastern Temperate Network biologist, and he'll be presenting today. I'm Savannah and I'm the Working Woodlands coordinator. So if you've never been to Working Woodlands before, this is just a series of workshops that we have to connect landowners and like nature enthusiasts to natural resource professionals. So
Great.
So just to,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. So just a few things that I wanted to remind everyone of. Just please keep muted, and if you have any questions, just type them up during the chat as like they come up, and then we can address them later. This is recorded, so just don't turn on your camera if you don't want to be in the video, because this does get uploaded to YouTube later. And then we also have closed captioning available if you need it. And then I also just wanted to share this land acknowledgement. I know it's not an in-person event, but we're still on Abenaki land, so I thought that'd be important. So I'll just read that for everyone. This land is a part of the traditional and unsurrendered homeland of the Abenaki people, where hundreds of generations have honored, entrusted, and cared for Ndakana, which is the Abenaki word for homeland. Abenaki community presence continues to be strong throughout the region. Abenaki kinship and traditions remain deeply connected to the lands, waters, plants, and animals of Ndakana. This homeland continues to be a place of Abenaki resilience, land stewardship, and creativity. We honor the original stewards of this land and are grateful to learn from and partner with the Abenaki community. And then before Adam gets started, I wanted to remind everyone that we have, it's kind of like a sister event to this workshop, but we have an in-person hike on Saturday, which is more bat information. And then this is a little far away, but in January, we have like a wildlife tracking virtual workshop that will be taking place. So with that, I'll let Adam start.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Savannah. Appreciate the intro. Hello, everybody. As Savannah said, I'm Adam Kozlowski. I work for the National Park Service, but I work for a slightly different branch of the National Park Service that many people are aware of. I'm just going to share my screen here to get going. All right, so folks should be seeing an arrowhead on the screen. Everything look okay and hear okay, Savannah? Okay, great. So like I mentioned, National Park Service for everybody here on the call, basically our mission statement is to preserve unimpaired the natural cultural resources for the future enjoyment and education inspiration of all visitors. And that's a powerful statement and easy to say, but it's a little harder to sort of follow through with, because in particular, to preserve the unimpaired natural cultural resources part, it sort of requires that we know what those natural resources and cultural resources, what their status is and what their trends are. And so the National Park Service, about 15 to 20 years ago, started a program specifically called the Inventory and Monitoring Division. And this is the division of the National Park Service that I work for. Our offices are based here at Marsh-Billings in Woodstock, Vermont, but our group, as you can see from this sort of camouflagey looking map, is divided into 32 different what are called networks across the United States. I happen to work for the Northeast Temperate, which is of course up here in the Northeast. And we help take care of and work on the natural resource monitoring for up to 14 different national parks, of which Marsh-Billings is one, and here in Woodstock, Vermont, and St. Gaudens is another one just over the Connecticut River in New Hampshire. So our branch of the National Park Service is responsible for setting up all the long-term sort of monitoring protocols, specifically for natural resources. And that includes things like forests, deer, wetland systems, air quality, noise pollution, light pollution, those sorts of things. Our job is to really watch these trends over many, many years, and then to inform and provide those data to the parks themselves so they can help make educated management decisions. So they basically have the data they need to help make hard choices about how they want to be able to distribute resources and time and energy to again, maintain those resources unimpaired for future generations. So that's the context of the inventory and monitoring program within the National Park Service and the role that it plays in providing data for the parks to be able to make decisions for programs that Savannah and others are working on. So, but for today, we're going to talk a little bit about bats. And in particular, we're going to focus a little bit on winter ecology because, you know, whether we like it or not, it's winter right now. And it's actually one of the more fascinating times of the year for bats and their ecology. But the main focus here is to sort of give you an appreciation for how specialized animals bats are. And in specifically how, you know, what their requirements are on the landscape. Like Savannah mentioned, the hike on Saturday, we'll spend a lot more time outside talking about forest management and how it can relate to and benefit the ecology of bats and other species using the forest. But, you know, we decided it'd be important to sort of give a basic primer on bats, specifically to sort of give you a feel for, again, what the requirements and life cycle is, because I think it's really going to shed a lot of light on how we think about the landscapes and preservation and safety of the bats. So to start out super basic here, you know, bats are mammals. There's lots of misnomers and concepts about bats, but it boils down to a very simple concept that they are mammals. They're the only true flying mammal on the planet, the group of bats. We know they're mammals because they're covered with hair. They feed their young milk. They're warm-blooded, just like all the other mammals are out there. They are a member of a mammalian order called Chiroptera. Which in Greek means hand wing, which, you know, again, they look like a really alien-like body formation when you first look at a bat and how different they are. But if you really break down the sort of physiology and also the anatomy of bats, they have analogous arm, forearm, and hand bones to just even to us here. This diagram here does a really nice job of coloring the analogous bones where you're looking at humeruses, ranius ulnas, and then all the metacarpals and tarsals that are involved in the bats. This photograph's also a great image where you can sort of get a good view of how their wing bones and hand bones are operating. And in fact, it's many parts of a bat's wing is comprised mostly of their fingers. And that gives them a ton of dexterity. You can imagine how you and I have so much dexterity in our hands and how we use them on a daily basis. Bats, you know, a lot of the wing membranes are connected between their fingers. And as a result, they have a ton of control. And as for anybody who's seen a bat fly at night, you can appreciate how much dexterity they have on the wing, so to speak, or on the hand, so to speak, now that you know that. Where did bats come from? And, you know, basically it comes down to a very specific event. We're looking at the massive extinction event that formed the sort of the signature of the Pleistocene. Not surprisingly, that was sort of the age of the dinosaurs, sort of, again, an era of myth and beasts. The meteor that struck the planet and created basically a long winter did not go over well with a lot of the ectotherms that were ruling the planet at the time, and it created an incredible gap in the ecosystem for basically the radiation of most of the mammals that we know of on the planet today. Not surprisingly, some of the first bat fossils were also starting to get found, you know, plus or minus a few million years from that same massive extinction event. It basically just created a giant opening of resources and energy that needed to be used by other sort of organisms, and the mammals sort of took over during that period of time. There are about 1,400 species of bats worldwide, 1,400 species of bats worldwide. That makes them 1 out of every 4 mammal species on the planet is a bat. So, you know, again, maybe a relatively secretive animal that a lot of people don't know about. But as far as mammals on the planet, it's an incredibly diverse group, taxonomic group. And they play all kinds of different roles with regards to ecosystem services, the plants that they're feeding on, different animals they feed on, part of the prey cycle, part of the feeding cycle, part of the energy cycle, part of distribution of seeds and plants, all those sorts of things. It's really incredible amount of diversity. Bats in New Hampshire and Vermont, people often ask how many we have. We have 9, in fact, here in Vermont. That's actually one more than New Hampshire has, because New Hampshire doesn't have the Indiana bat. But basically, we can break them into 2 major categories. Primarily, we have our cave and hibernating bat species, which is 1 through 6 here on the slide. And then we have 3 tree or migratory bat species, or highly migratory bat species. And those are the 3 across the bottom of the slide here. You often hear about bat wind interactions with regards to turbines and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of like distribution of the species based on their life cycle and life history here. So the cave-dwelling bats is we'll talk quite a bit about them, but we're also going to talk about the tree and migratory bats and some of their life cycle requirements, because they are pretty different from each other. Diet, across the planet, we've got everything under the sun, like I mentioned earlier. We have a lot of fruit-eating bats, nectar-feeding bats, pollen-feeding bats, a lot of invertebrates, some fishing bats, ones that have the capability to scoop down and actually scoop fish right off the top of the water, the way you might see a bald eagle or something do that. We have meat-eating amphibians, mammals, all kinds of things. The vampire bat, of course, is a bat of legend, but is a very real thing. There's 3 species of vampire bats that feed on blood in the New World. In fact, some of them have historically been found even into Texas, into the lower 48 in the United States. But in the great picture of things, 70% of bats do eat insects. And in fact, within North America, that number goes up to closer to 90% of the species in North America eat insects. And if you come up into the Northeast, the United States, you're looking at 100% of the bats here are insect feeders and rely on insects for making their way in life. So insects tend to be the dominant thing people think of when they think of bats. But on a global scale, they play a pretty strong role in the food cycle on a lot of different aspects. From specifically for pollination of plants, and then also distribution of seeds, as they are basically pooping out the seeds of the fruits that they're eating and distribute them throughout the forest. I'd be remiss not to mention a little bit about echolocation within bats, which in and of itself is an incredibly fascinating, very unique thing across the animal planet. There are other species, obviously, that use echolocation, but bats are one of the few that do it on the wing versus like in the water, like some of the whales and dolphin species do. In about late 1930s, early 1940s, there was a particular researcher named Donald Griffin and Robert Galambos. They were working on bat echolocation, and in fact coined the term echolocation in 1944, basically describing the process by which bats are sending out pulses of ultra frequency sound, very high frequency sound, and using the reflection of those sound off of individual targets, whether that be food related or even just sort of navigational targets like trees or walls or those sorts of things that they need to avoid in their environment in order to navigate. 1944 probably conjures up a lot of things for some people, but in particular, most people probably think of what was going on in the world at that time. World War II was full mode at this time and era, and in fact, something along the lines of sonar and echolocation purposes for military was a really big thing. It was considered a top secret technology, and so to have a small zoology lab making claims that bats were doing these very same things that we had just figured out how to do sort of from a military perspective, actually created quite a bit of a furor at the time. And there was a lot of interest on the part of the military for the same research that was coming out with the discovery that bats were using echolocation. So it wasn't very long ago, we talk about how long the bats have been around and doing their thing, but it was only, about 80 years ago that we realized that echolocation was how things were working. Now, you may think it's a pretty crude thing, at least for me, when I think of military echolocation, I think of the classic movies with the circle and the green line and the blips that show up every time the line comes around, a very crude way to find your way around. Sure, it tells you what's in your environment, but it may do it at a really infrequent rate or a very unsatisfactory level of detail, making it difficult. And you can imagine, obviously, then that how crude that may be a way to see. You know, you and I use light. You know, we use light either from the sun, or if we're in a closed office with no windows, we have artificial light that are giving us basically packages of information that our brain is able to translate into the things that are around us. It tells us color and texture and location of objects and sort of like that. So bats are using sound to do a lot of those same things. You know, you can't see color with sound because color is based on wavelengths of energy. But I think you're going to be surprised, and I hope to give you a few demonstrations of the capabilities of what they're seeing. So bats tend to call at about 10, if they're just cruising in the environment, they're basically shouting at about 10 times a second. So, and I say shouting because it does they put a lot of energy into their calls. Sound degrades at the square root of the radius of a circle. So as you call, sound spreads out from all around you. And you made me most interested in what's in front of you, but you can't control sound. It's vibration of air particles, and it's just going to slowly, that energy is going to dissipate the farther it gets away from you. So you need to put a ton of energy into making a strong enough call that can go out, bounce off something, and then it's going to degrade itself in energy all the way back to you. So you not only have to be loud, but you need to be hardwired with sort of the biology and ecology of the anatomy to be able to pick those sounds back up again. So it takes a lot of energy on their part. So when they're just cruising, you're doing 10 calls a second. So you can imagine that's giving you basically 10 snapshots a second of information back to you of what's going on in your environment, which is pretty good, but 10 times a second is, you know, probably not that great. And in fact, to help you think about that, it's about what a machine gun is going to be firing. So that rate of that's about how fast you're getting, they're getting images back to their brain about what their environment is seeing. So good, but, you know, could be better. And in fact, it is get better when they go into the sort of a hunting mode, when they're in the process of, they're either in a very cluttered environment or complex environment that they need to find their way around in, or they're specifically honing in on something that they want to be able to scoop up for a meal. They're going to send up to 200 bursts a second. So now they're getting 200 pictures a second of echoed information back from the insect or object or whatever that they tend to be targeting at that point. Are really impressive. And to give you some idea of that, so and this is, bear with me here for a little bit of electronics here, which you probably didn't expect, but so our typical US main electrical system works on a cycling system, and it works on 60 hertz. Which gives us a voltage of about 110 volts. So when you plug a toaster into the wall and getting 110 volts, you're basically working on a cycle system where you've got 60 hertz per second per cycle, which means that you cross this zero line twice every cycle. And what that ends up doing is it gives you about 120 pictures a second, essentially, of when a complex fluorescent light bulb is running. It's basically blinking at the rate that the electricity from our main is cycling through it. So if you were in a completely dark room, no sunlight, which is continuous light, you're using strictly compact fluorescent light bulbs, like some of you may be in your office right now or at a home office or something like that. This may be the case. Your brain is actually receiving 120 pictures a second. So the light is actually blinking 120 times a second. The human brain can only pick up about 60 blinks per second. After that, it sort of just lumps it all together into a continuous image. And so you generally don't see that. But in the reality of it is that you're getting 120 pictures a second. So if you and I can sit in our office with the lights on, artificial lights on, and basically not be aware of 120 pictures a second, bats getting 200 pictures a second, it gives you some idea of like the continuous amount of information and how sort of maybe more sophisticated it is in your head than what they're really seeing. Now, I can give it a whole other talk on echolocation of itself, which in itself is an incredibly fascinating thing on how bats sort out all the returning echoes, how they use swooping calls from high frequency to low frequency, how they take advantage of all the wavelengths that they're calling at to either see fine level of detail or coarse level of detail. They're playing with all kinds of really fascinating things. They play with the Doppler effect, you know, the whole idea where you hear an ambulance or something go by that makes that, they actually take advantage of the Doppler effect and the rate that they're moving to calculate distance and speed on things. So it's really, really incredible. But just if you come away with the idea that they're seeing 200 pictures a second, and that's probably another 50 or 60% better than what we can see in an office space, then I think that's probably pretty good to give you an appreciation for what they're able to do. So a little bit about their life cycle in general. And because again, this really drives everything about their ecology, and in particular, when we're talking about conservation of these species and what we need to do to help them on the landscape, this little cycle here we're going to walk through is really, really key. So I'm going to start in sort of late autumn. That generally tends to be when courtship and mating is occurring in these species. It's you know, a lot of times that people would attribute that to spring for a lot of species, but in bats it's in the fall. And they do that before because the winter is a really sort of dramatic time for them. And they either have a selection process of dealing with winter by either with a hibernation or migration techniques. And we're going to talk about those in more detail here in a second. But winter is a pretty harsh time, and they're able to make sort of decisions with how they're going to, you know, have babies the next year by getting, when they're in their prime in the fall, getting you know, a lot of the energy intensive courtship behavior and breeding behavior out of the way before they go into a long winter. Because by spring, when they're either awake from hibernation or come back on their long migration, their body condition generally isn't as good as it can be, and that they're basically, you know, every calorie counts at that point, and spending it on courtship and mating is not good use of that energy. So they basically do that in the fall. So fertilization and implantation also occur in the spring, which you can see that there's obviously a large gap between the mating activities in the fall and implantation in the spring. Again, a really cool trick that bats and actually a lot of mammals have to be able to actually sort of self-assess what condition they're in and whether it's in their best interest and their offspring's best interest to actually go ahead and have kids or not that year. So that's what occurs in the spring. So that decision is made not sort of consciously, but, you know, biologically through the body condition of the females. At that point, you know, the males and females sort of go off to do different things. The maternity colonies that bats form, large maternity colonies that maybe some of you are familiar with down in Texas, and the free-tailed bat populations coming out from under the bridges and stuff, those tend to be mostly maternity colonies. They're selected to be very stable, very warm, very hot environments, basically to act like a giant mother bat. Because bats are mammals and feed their young milk, which, you know, sounds like an obvious statement, but it's pretty different than a bird. So when a bird needs to feed its baby bird, mom and dad can bring food back to feed that baby bird. In a case where you're feeding milk, only the mother can feed the child, and so therefore the mother has to be able to go out and forage. So she will leave her young attached to the roost and go out and forage. When they're really young, when they're really, really young, she can sometimes fly with them attached, but for the most of the developing part of a young bat, they're stay in the roost while mom goes out and feeds. And so the quality of the foraging habitat is really important, but the even more important is the quality of the maternity roost, having a nice, stable, safe, warm place for all these young bats to sort of basically be. You can see from the picture that they're generally don't have a lot of hair when they're really young. Their eyes are closed. They can be pretty helpless. So, you know, they basically need a giant, you know, literally a nursery area for them to be while mom's off foraging. They can't rely on her body heat or other care during that time. So these maternity colonies are super, super important. But for males, they can be a really stressful place because they're very hot and very humid, and metabolically they can be a tough place to be. And so the males tend to be actually spread out on the landscape. They stay in cooler areas, and it also helps separate the overlap so that the areas the females are foraging and hunting in are exclusively for them, and they're not competing with the males of their population for food to feed the young. So the males can actually geographically separate themselves, which is good for their roost space, but also good for the fact that they're not overlapping in their foraging communities. So there's some really cool sort of spatial geometry going on there also. And it's something that needs to be taken into account when you're managing a landscape for bats also. So birth occurs in midsummer, a late spring, midsummer, and you're looking at a birth of anywhere between 1 and 4 young. Bats are actually really slow to reproduce. You know, again, producing 1 or 2 young on average per year. And so, you know, as a slowly reproducing mammal species, it's again important that they have sort of long-term safe environments that they can function in, because they aren't able to replace themselves very quickly. They aren't like coyotes or insect species in having tons and tons of young and putting them all out there and seeing what makes it to the next generation. Bats put a lot of investment in very few young at a time. So flight has to occur soon after this, after birth and being raised up from these tiny little pups. They need to be fed, taught to fly, and then taught to hunt, and they're off echolocating and feeding themselves really, really quickly. And in fact, they have to learn really, really quickly because they're going to have to put on about 20, and up here in the Northeast anyways, they're going to be looking at putting about 25% of their body weight on and either heading into their first hibernation or migration just within 2 or 3 months of having been born. So a really tight turnaround for that first year for them. And they've got a lot to learn, and also not just to learn, but a lot of weight to put on in order to make it to make it through the first winter. And they do all this up to 20 times. You may be surprised. Like I mentioned, they're slow reproducing, but that's generally paired with long lives, and bats are no different. Typical bats, it's not atypical that bats are living for a couple of decades and reproducing this cycle we just talked about for up to 20 years. So pretty impressive there too. So dealing with winter, I want to talk a little bit more about that, not just because we're in winter now, but because this really is really unique for such a small mammal species like a bat they have sort of a lot of tools at their disposal, and it's at least fascinating for me to be able to talk through some of these things. So winter, winter is easy to sort of have an image in your head of what it looks like: icy, snowy, cold. But really, for most animals, that means that there's an incredible drop in temperature, and there's an incredible drop in, at least for insect-eating species like bats, incredible drop in food. So they have no way to bring more energy in, and they're expected to burn a lot of energy in order to keep their body temperature up. Because again, as a warm-blooded mammal, they can't just, without cost, drop their body temperature down very much. So these are the two things that these temperature and food is what we're going to talk about through these, and the strategies that they use to combat that. So the options, like we've sort of hinted at here, is migration, which is moving somewhere else, or hibernation, which is sleeping in place, or even there's a sort of this hybrid approach that we can talk about. So going through these one at a time, there's really going to be some costs and benefits. There's no right answer. Different bats use different strategies. Even different bats as individuals rather than species use different strategies. Species tend to do one thing or the other, but depending on where they are in the Northeast, you can see them using mixes and matches of some of these techniques. And to drive home just another quick point is that, bats in environments that require either migration or hibernation, it's actually pretty unusual. So most of, we talked about 1,400 bat species worldwide. 1 out of 4 mammals on the planet are bats. Most of those are in the tropics or neotropics. And so very few of them actually make a lifestyle up in the northern environments, because dealing with winter is such an incredibly, ecologically taxing event for them. So this is, where we live in a really cool part of the country, because we have bats and we have them dealing with winter, and that actually isn't all that common when it comes to a species by species level. So option 1, migration. So how does migration deal with these two bottlenecks? Basically, it deals with both of them by, making both of those better. So you're going to increase you're going to travel to increase temperature, and you're going to travel to increase your food. There's a lot of people that even people that like to do this. We call them snowbirds. It's a pretty good life if you can get somewhere where there's warmer and there's abundant levels of food. It's a great way to deal with winter. So then why doesn't everything just migrate? I mean, how could life be any better than, sitting there having your snacks on the beach? Well, for the most part, there's a lot of migrational trade-offs. We're looking at, it's an incredibly risky thing to travel the distance that you're traveling. Everything from habitat degradation, you got to be able to piece together a lot of different, food resources as you fly down, piece together landing sites, roosting sites, those sorts of things. We talked a little bit about wind turbines. So for our migratory species, wind turbines can be a threat of sorts. We have landscape predators like house cats that are outdoors, and those sorts of things can be threats to bats, as well as some of our more native predators. In general, we have light pollution and habitat fragmentation. There's lots and lots of costs to traveling through these environments. And a lot of those costs make it so that not all bat species choose migration as their technique, because this isn't just done one way, it's done 2 ways. So every year you've got to make this perilous journey twice. And that always isn't to the bat species advantage. Some quick fun facts on migration, in particular, and these are for a lot of the species that use here in the Northeast, that we're looking at anything from sort of regional migrators, which are maybe going 50 to maybe 300 miles. So we're talking about something between here and Maryland. They're going just far enough south to sort of soften things up a little bit with regards to temperature and food. Just go far enough that they can get as many more resources as they need, versus some of our long migrators who are just like, we're going to go far enough south that we're sure we're back in an environment where it's fully summer every day. And these are the ones that are migrating between 600 and 1,000 miles. So we have, you know, bats that are choosing different strategies here. Speed, people often ask, well, you know, how fast are they covering this ground? You're looking at it probably on average about 30 miles per day that they're traveling. And migration season tends to be here anyways. It start as early as August, and they're trying to, a lot of species are either where they need to be or have started to wrap things up by the end of September. And then again, just kind of like the maternity roosts and use of space, migration can also be very sex-based. The males doing very different things than the females are doing based on their metabolic requirements. So a lot of variation in the tricks of migration. So the second option, if you're not going to migrate, you know, if you're not going to go down and drink pina coladas on the beach, you know, what else can you do? And this is where the hibernation or torpor comes in. And this is sort of the opposite of a maternity colony. Maternity colonies are selected as, again, they can be cave systems or buildings or bridges or artificial or natural structures that are specifically selected because they're stable and warm. Hibernacula are almost sort of a flip to that, in that they need to be really stable, but they need to be really cold. So basically they're relying on the structure itself to provide an environment that the bat can basically let go, sort of relax into a torpor state and rely on the environment to keep it at the perfect temperature. So why would you go this method, and how does it exactly work? So again, coming back to winter, where you have a drop in temperature and you have a drop in food, and this is where you sort of embrace, hibernation is sort of a technique by which you embrace the drop in temperature. And this comes back to the fact that metabolism is really sort of the burn rate. It's the rate at which you're using energy in your body. You know, we like to keep our body temperature at 98.5 degrees. That basically sets the rate at which our cells are using energy. And then there's a certain amount of time goes by before you run out of energy and you need to feed. Either you're going to burn fat resources for energy, or you're going to take in more resources of food. And bats are no different. They have metabolism. They have a certain rate at which they're burning that energy, and they have a certain amount of time that they are required between meals. Winter basically says, look, I've got about 6 months where I'm going to need to be able to burn energy, but I'm not going to be able to take energy in. They can't really do anything about the 6 months. Winter is winter, but you can do something about the rate at which you burn it. And so they basically will lower their metabolism in a way to combat and to match up with temperature. Now, food is the same way. That's the rate. So if metabolism, the rate at which you're burning it, sort of how much you have in your gas tank is, you know, is mass. And so bats tend to be way between only about 5 and 15 grams. Think of a US quarter for a basic weight. And so that's sort of their weight that they're starting with. And because they're a flighted mammal, they have a fair bit of restrictions on how much weight they can put on. They can't just double their weight, or they would never be able to get off the ground. So they're kind of caught between this pinch point of putting on enough weight to make it through the winter, but not putting on so much weight that they're not able to fly. So there's an incredibly, just amazingly narrow range at which they can accept body mass to sort of fit into this formula. So hibernation basically then is taking that metabolic rate and lowering it, and taking your weight and adding to it. And so they're trying to sort of play both categories. So they're taking their typical body temperature of anywhere between 97 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. They're lowering that to something on the order of 35 to 41 degrees, which not automatically is the temperature of a hibernacula, right? So they're selecting these sites that are between 35 and 41 degrees and really stable. If it goes too cold from that, the bat's body will actually start to shiver in order to burn energy. Basically, they turn on the furnace a little bit to bring their body temperature back up to 35 to 41. And that's essentially increasing their metabolism. So if the temperature is too cold, they burn energy to be warm and they can starve to death in that 180 days. If their hibernacula becomes too warm, that also raises metabolism and they can burn through their energy resources before winter is up. So that 35 to 41 degree range for hibernacula is super, super important. If they're able to lower their metabolism and their body temperature that low, that also changes their beats per minute. So those are heart rates. So typical summer heart rate for a bat is between 200 and 300 beats per minute. They can lower that to 10 beats per minute when they're in full torpor. And you're talking about breathing once every 15 minutes. So all these sort of metabolic tricks that they play, it boils down to them being able to reduce their energy consumption by 98%. Between sort of a summer bat fully active and a sleeping torpored winter bat, they can, basically bring their energy requirements down by 98%. So that's big step one, right? Is to use temperature to your advantage to lower your metabolism. But you're still going to need some gas in your gas tank, and that's where the food part comes in. And so there's a heavy feeding that goes on in the fall. Whether you're migratory or you're hibernating technique, in both cases, you're going to need to put on weight because you're going to have a pretty metabolically intensive winter. You're either going to have to migrate and fly up to 30 miles a day, like I was saying, or you're going to have to go to sleep with this resource that's supposed to last you throughout through the length of the winter. So that's the trick to hibernation, is to sort of thread that needle. And as you can see, there's a lot of places for it to go wrong and for it to be a relatively dangerous thing. But if you get it just right, it works out great, and you come out into awakeness next spring ready to go. So as you can imagine, location with this, right? Hibernation has everything to do with picking a correct site. So a lot of times, I'm sure folks have seen pictures of gated caves or mines or different sort of selected areas. These are incredibly valuable resources on our landscape, mostly because they're unusual and they're relatively rare, and they're also concentrating bats from a very large area into a small area, so that they become like it's like taking an entire population on a landscape and pulling it all down to a couple hundred square yards. So that can be, obviously, they're incredibly vulnerable at this point of view, whether it's because people are visiting the cave or something has happened to change the environment in the cave, that's no longer those temperatures, no longer able to keep stable cold temperatures, or it reaches some sort of disturbance or other invasive thing comes in, like raccoons or something like that, is able to all of a sudden reach the hibernacula. So these are incredibly valuable sites, and they're also relatively rare on the landscape. They play a really important role in that entire life cycle. So maternity colonies, hibernacula, these are sort of like pinch points in that life cycle that if they're not on the landscape, they can have a really dramatic effect on a local bat population. Trade-offs to hibernation. Again, like I mentioned, disturbance is a really big deal. If they wake up, if there's any sort of changes, their reliance on the hibernacula to begin with can be fraught with danger. You've got predator issues that can come while you're sleeping and eat part of your population. So there's certainly some dangers associated with this. And the newest one that's come along is the white nose syndrome, which many of you probably heard. It's well over a decade old at this point. In fact, it started just outside of Albany. It was discovered. It's a European fungus that grows on bats. The picture in the lower right shows an ultraviolet image with the fungus itself glowing sort of that yellowish color under the UV light. In the picture on the lower left, showing basically where it gets its common namesake from, the white nose syndrome, with this idea that the fungus actually grows on a lot of the exposed tissue and surfaces, skin of bats, and creates these sort of puffy white, like bread fungus looks on your old bread around the mouth and muzzle. This obviously creates an incredible amount of discomfort for the bat, generally tends to cause them to arouse multiple times during the winter, thereby increasing their metabolism, and they essentially will end up starving to death just because they burn through too much of their resources. It's had a pretty dramatic effect on bat populations, to the point where species like the little brown bat, which was one of the most common mammalian species on the planet, 20 or 30 years ago. It's now actually being proposed for listing as an endangered species by the federal government. So we've had incredible population drops of 90, 95% in some circumstances because of this white nose. And you can see from the color codes here, where from purple at the top of the color key, slowly through the greens, yellows, oranges into reds, which is 2021. It basically tracks the path of the fungus and where it's shown up in different bat populations from 2006, which is purple with the red X right there in eastern central New York, not just but a couple hours from where we are here in Woodstock, Vermont, all the way down to the red zones where we've seen it spread west across the United States. Not all doom and gloom, although a lot of doom and gloom. We have started to see, especially in the populations here in the East, some resilience, as does happen with most diseases, is the individuals that are able to survive the sort of initial sort of outbreaks are the ones that go ahead and repopulate their populations and have some sort of level of resistance to what's going on. So we're seeing some mild recovery here in the Northeast because the disease has been around long enough. And again, because bats are slow reproducing to replace themselves, it's taken a little while to sort of bring these populations slowly back. But it's hard when you bring populations down that far, and with all the other stressors there are on them in the environment, it's a pretty dangerous place for a species to be. So white nose syndrome's been sort of the talk of the town, so to speak, here for the last 15 years with regards to bats. So I just want to quickly go back to show you some idea of the impact of this. This is back to our list of bats that are found in Vermont. Again, broken into the top half, which is cave bats, and the lower half, which is migratory bats. I'm going to throw on here the listings. As far as this is an indication of some level of population stability in the species, and you can see right away that there's a definite pattern here, right? So cave bats have really are either on the state endangered species lists or on the federal one marked with the U.S. Either proposed or under review or actually already with endangered status. So you can see that the cave bats in particular and that's where the white nose is really an issue. It likes cold, humid environments, and so it generally isn't an issue at all in our sort of migratory bats, which use leaf litter and other roosts and also tend to be a little more solitary and less social than our cave bats are. So you can see that white nose really has affected, for the most part, our cave dwelling species, whereas our migratory bats have remained relatively unscathed from it. So an obvious pattern when you sort of know what's going on, when you know a little bit about the ecology, you know what their behaviors are, you know what their requirements are, and then you look at something like white nose, at some point you can sort of predict that these are the patterns going to show up. But it's sort of the value in sort of doing a full walkthrough on what these species requirements are, because patterns like this then all of a sudden start to really make a lot of sense. So I don't want to leave you on a really sad note. I want to leave you on sort of a resiliency note. And, in such, I want to talk a little bit about the hybrid approach. Full migration is one thing, full hibernation is another. We're obviously in an era with a lot of evidence that we're going to have changing environments and more variability to our weather patterns, likely milder winters, wetter winters here in the Northeast. And so, bats aren't although they have very narrow sort of ecological ranges that they need to meet for temperature and location and hibernacle and all those sorts of things. They also have a lot of resiliency and flexibility in that they sort of, a lot of ways, can collect these sort of hybrid approaches where they're traveling short or small distances in order to sort of maximize their ability to meet their requirements. So we're looking at like micro hibernations where like they can be flying to hibernacule in the winter to maternity colonies in the summer, and all of it within just, within 100 miles or something like that. So we're seeing, a lot of flexibility in their ability to sort of pick out the pieces on the landscape that are important to us. And it isn't sort of an all or none or black and white, that there's a lot of sort of gray area in between it. And that it's probably what's going to allow them to sort of survive in a changing environment. And it's really how it should work in general. So just in the in a sort of as a final closeout, I just wanted to, sort of drive home how important the ecology part is. So like I mentioned, we're going to be doing a walk on Saturday. We're going to talk a lot more about, sort of bats on the landscape and what it actually means. How do we, maybe once we know what a bat is, what its requirements are, what are important to it, how do we go about sort of, making it as welcoming as possible on our sort of our landscape? We're managing for a lot of different species. Obviously bats are one of many things that we would like to see our healthy forests be able to support. But it's, it has some very specific requirements to it. And so, really getting to know a bat, not just for what its summer uses are, but what it may need for its migration, what the males need versus the females need, what do they need during reproductive capacity for the maternity colonies, what do they need for winter structures, how big of an area for foraging do they have, is there open water for them to be able to get water at, so there's all these, you really have to look at the full cycle in order to create an environment that's sustainable for a good bat population. And that's really important. I mean, that's sort of the holistic approach to how we want to manage land in general, is to be able to not have any bottlenecks. So you may be really good at producing maternity colonies, but if you're unable to, maintain good foraging habitat or winter habitat, it really isn't going to do you much good. So it's really a complex sort of formula, and it comes down to sort of understanding bats and their requirements, and in fact, all species and their requirements, and looking at it as a full picture. So anyway, I hope what we talked about today was helpful for you, gives you some idea of, how detailed and important the different life cycles are, and that they all need to be taken into account in order to have a healthy bat population. So I think right now, probably like to take some questions. Looks like we got about 15 minutes left, which should be good. Hopefully the chat has a few, and if not, obviously people can unmute themselves and we can chat a little bit about anything that you either want more information on, or I've covered too quickly, or anything else that you may have to ask. So I'll stop there and take questions. Savannah, can you see anything in the chat? I'm sort of navigating my back there. I'm just stop sharing.
Yeah, there are a few questions in the chat. I can read them out if you like.
Okay, yeah.
Or you can, whichever you prefer.
Yeah. So I'm going to just take them in order, I guess. So we're looking at is a bat in the photo eating another bat. We generally, to my knowledge, we don't have any bat species that predate on other bats. The photograph itself may have been probably a frog. There was a picture in the upper, like at the 12 o'clock position of the circle, that was talking about eating frogs. So yeah, eating amphibians, scorpions, centipedes, fish, a really wide range of things. But to my knowledge, there aren't bat-eating bats out there. What is the survival rate of pups in their first year? That's a really good question. It generally is pretty high. I don't have a specific percentage, but again, the strategy, there's lots of different strategies in wildlife. There's sort of the cast as many out there as you can, low energy per individual. Think of mayflies or spider eggs or something along those lines, where you're just expecting to lose, 95 to 99% of what goes out there. But then there's the other end of the spectrum, which tends to be the low reproduction, high cares category, where you're only having one or two offspring, but then you keep them with you as a parent for a really long period of time. It tends to be some of the larger bear mammals and those sorts of things, but there's also several bird species that also sort of rely on that strategy also, but there's a lot of parental care for a pretty significant amount of time before they let and also not only just raising, but also training and sort of teaching them the ropes. And bats fall in that category. So survival rate, as far as like the full spectrum is concerned, it generally tends to be relatively good, because the young bats are taken care of by their parents. But a specific percentage, I'm afraid I don't really know. And maybe I'll try and look that up in between now and the next time I give this talk. Looks like someone that's going to maybe attending Saturday and wanting to know how to, attract and support bats on a 3-acre plot. So that'll be great. And we will be talking about that on Saturday, I'm sure. Where and when is the walk on Saturday? So what is it? Savannah,
It's
is it 1?
it's December 9th, this Saturday, and it's from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. I'll post the link to the registration if you'd like to come. And we're going to be meeting at the Forest Center at Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller National Historical Park. So, and I'm going to send out an email to everyone who signs up with like a little map if you don't know where the Forest Center is. So if you register with your email, I'll be sure to send that to you.
Yeah, great. Stan remarks on the fact that, with regards to summer roosts, that, multiple secondary roosts distributed between 2 or more foraging habitats. Have any studies been performed showing how narrow or wide hedgerows should be to provide corridors between the two? It's a great question. I'm not sure how much hedgerows have played a role in sort of landscape movement with bats with regards to the research for the two. Maybe we could chat a little bit more about that at some point. I don't have specific, recommendations on hedgerow widths. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to be much help on that particular question, but it's a good one. Certainly, heterogeneity of the landscape and also sort of fragmentation of the landscape is a really big piece. And just the concept that you've got sort of the water, food, and sort of a roosting space all sort of within a certain distance of each other is an important component. Any attractants to draw bats towards new house installations? The only one that I've seen used that, whether it works or not, I'm not sure, but it seems to, is actually get old bat guano. Just get a cup full of it from somewhere, either another roost or that sort of thing. And just soak it in a glass of water until it makes like a tea, and then you actually soak the inside of the box. This idea that it just smells like bats have been there before, I've seen that being used, particularly with new wood construction and that sort of thing, is to get it to sort of age out and also take on some other scents. Was one of the tricks I've done. As far as like pheromones or any sort of artificial attractants or smells or anything like that, no. But if you can get it to smell like bats have already used it in the past, there's some chance that you're going to get at least some bats that'll come in and check it out, and maybe feel a little more comfortable on their first or second use of the box. Got a good question. It says, what are 3 things any landowner can do to help bats not able to attend walk? I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get to 3, but really, so multi-age structure woods are really important, not just for bats, but for a lot of species. So, bats can be used everything from the cavities to even loose bark structure, snags, trees that are either have been hung up by other trees and stay upright, or trees that make it all the way to the ground. So that variation, everything from salamanders to bats to different foraging strategies for birds, is super important. Our forests, a lot of people tend to like a park-like setting in their forests. A lot of times, I mean, I've often heard the term that these forests look messy, and so people like to maybe clean up a little bit, whether that be some of the young sapling or brush. But what ends up happening is you're basically narrowing the range of the age structure that your forest can hold. And over time, what that does is it either creates gaps in the age structure, so that as the trees get older, there's nothing from that generation, because maybe a landowner for 10 years cleaned out all the low brush so that they could see or walk more easily through the forest. So that can actually create like these funny little bubbles, age bubbles, that eventually will get to different age structures that affect different species. So as far as like 3 things any landowner can do, one of the primary thing, and there's a lot wrapped into this, is to sort of maintain as much sort of land diversity as you possibly can, particularly with your forested structure. Bats tend to like edge space to hunt a little bit, but again, edge space in the Northeast is sort of a mixed basket. We were naturally, a 90% forested system, relatively unusual, or at least only for disturbed areas that you would have openings. And those would, within, a certain amount of time successionally move back to a forest structure. you know, we have plenty of edge space in the world right now, particularly with the amount of just sort of, you know, man-made use and the way we maintain open space and that sort of thing. So edge is usually not an issue. One of the limiting factors really here in the Northeast is good, well-structured forests. And for as far as landowners can do for that, I would say, you know, maintaining good forest health and structure and age structure is really important in plant and species diversity. What distance should there be between bat houses? Can they be too close? No, they really can't. You know, and you know, as far as distance is concerned, it's like most other sort of artificial roosting structures, whether they be bird boxes or anything else. You're probably not gonna know completely what it is about particular houses that are gonna work, and so you might as well put up maybe more than you're gonna need and watch how they settle in, and then keep the ones and learn from the ones that worked and the ones that didn't work. Really, for us, you know, again, you sort of like go through the ecology of what we talked about here, as to what you want your house to be able to do. There's everything from like a hibernacula, which is really hard to do for a bat house, to a maternity colony, which is hard but doable. You can produce maternity roost bat houses if you keep them hot and stable, often attaching them to something that has a lot of thermal mass or positioned in a way that they gather a lot of solar heat during the day, paint them a dark color, put them over something like you know, over a asphalt driveway or something like that that radiates heat again. You can do a lot of things to make sure those houses stay as warm and as stable as you can, and that's going to increase your chance the house is used. There's a third use by roosts, and those are night roosts. So as bats are out foraging and flying around, they will often rest for a couple of hours, kind of wherever they happen to be. It tends to be the ones that people see on porches and stuff. They'll come in and just sort of hang out on a porch for a few hours and fly away. If they sort of lose track of time, sometimes they'll still be there in the morning, and people get a lot of, I get a lot of reports of bats on screen doors or up near the lamp or on the corner of their porch, and people asking if the bat's okay. That's basically a night roost that the bat sort of lost track of, and for whatever reason never left it in the morning, and is usually stuck there for one more day during the daylight, and then they're gone the next day. But so that a night roost, bat boxes can play some role in night roost, give them a place to just safely rest for a little while, where they're not, you know, subject to owls or anything like that. So there's that opportunity for them too. And those can be close to their foraging areas, out in, you know, open areas near ponds, that sort of thing. But sort of ask yourself what you'd like to do, and that's going to sort of generate, you know, where you're going to want to put them. And then there really isn't a limit to how many or how close they are. They're not competitive in any way or territorial in any way. They aren't going to compete with each other as far as that. You're probably just going to increase your chances that you got the right combination of factors in place, and the box is going to, one of your boxes is going to be functional or be just what they're looking for. This last person, Lori, says put a bat house about 2 years ago on her shed and no luck. Does see bats flying around, but any thoughts about improving chances? It's super tough how that works. It can be a lot of different factors. Again, you may just try some small variations. It has a lot to do with what they're looking for, and sort of a lot of guesswork. Hopefully some of what I was talking about with what their goals are, you know, what their requirements are, may help you a little bit. Maybe it's into too cool of an area. Maybe it's needs to be painted a darker color, maybe more stable temperatures. I'm not sure. It can be really tricky to get them to be attractive just right. Thanks, Lori. So that rolled through the questions in the chat. Anything else by anyone? Any last minute thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam, for doing this. This is a really
No
great
problem.
presentation.
No problem. I hope to see a lot of these folks back out for the hike if you can make it, because it'll just be sort of a different angle on what we talked about today. And you guys are, since you're all bat experts now, maybe we can help us and Steve, our resource manager, chat out some strategies for the park.
Oh, Adam, we have like two more questions.
Yeah.
Tina asked, are there any times when you want citizens to report bat sightings? And then we also have someone asking if they can maybe have a copy of the slides.
Yeah, sure. I can send the slides to you, Savannah, and you're free to distribute them however you want to. That's totally great. With regards to reporting bats, I mean, maternity, again, the values of these, individual bats foraging and that sort of stuff can be really, not necessarily all that valuable any more than is to see birds at a bird feeder or something like that. But particularly for maternity colonies, bats that are in an area where they're actually reproducing and have some value, I think that's probably worth reporting to either Fish and Game, or it's something that we could pass along also as something that may have an actual population level value. Particularly our hibernaculus are really big deals. So, I mean, those are really, really hard to find unless you happen to be a caver and that sort of thing. And most caves are known about in this area. But if you find a place where you have overwintering bats, those can also be really valuable. So I would either say hibernacula or maternity colonies are probably worth telling somebody about, just again, because they have an outsized value for their conservation of the species. They're affecting essentially a very large area concentrated into a small area. But the rest of it is probably just, you're lucky to see them, but probably isn't worth reporting it.
All right, and I think it's 1 o'clock, so we can end, and I don't see any more questions. So if you would like the slides, I put my email in the chat and I will definitely send them to you. I just thought it would be easier if I gave out my email rather than trying to collect everyone else's. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Please register for the hike on Saturday if you can come. And have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Adam.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.